I would say the other thing is whenever I'm going for a walk, I'm in a flow state. So I actually don't like sitting still and talking. I much prefer to walk and talk. It's just hard to do that on Zoom or whatever, right? So I find myself sitting more than I like when I'm talking to people. I'd much rather be on the phone taking a walk. And when I talk to my coworkers, I'm almost always walking. So I tend not to do video calls. I much prefer to do audio. So that way I can put my headphones in and take a walk and talk.
I think it will be a great name for your podcast, Walking and Podcasting.
I've wanted to do a walk and talk podcast for a long time, actually. I think it'd be way more interesting, frankly. So I don't know, maybe one day.
You mentioned you have several products now. And from your perspective, you were going to Basecamp, one product. And are you looking for expand and growth now? Why now?
It's a great question. We used to have many products, and then we went back down just to one. And then over the past few years, we launched Hey, and now we've launched Campfire under the Once umbrella, which is a new brand of ours. Why are we doing this? Well, we had an itch. We realized that we're makers, and we were holding ourselves back. And once you can hold yourself back for a little bit and be comfortable with that, but there's a point where you go, why are we limiting ourselves? Let's see if we can do more again. It's not really to grow the business as much as it is to grow it's not even growing as much as it's exercising our interests. We have new ideas. Hey was a brand new idea for us. We wanted to really rethink email. We just launched a Hey Calendar. We wanted to really rethink calendaring. Why? Because we use these things all the time and we're tool makers. We want to make the tools. We want to make the things that we use, and we have better ideas. We're frustrated by the state of the art. When we get frustrated, we end up making stuff. That's what we do. So we've been frustrated a lot lately. And so for us, the answer is to make things, not to complain, but to make stuff. And so the next thing we're going to build is based on another frustration that we have. Why is it so hard to do X? Or why can't I do X? Or why does it take 3 or 4 or 5 different products to do X? I don't mean X, Twitter, X as an example. Why? This should be simpler. And if we're struggling with this, others are too. Let's make something for them and for us at the same time. So I think we just have that. We're in that state right now. And I think when you've been in business for 25 years, you're going to go through some cycles. And once we had a cycle of plenty, and then we had a cycle of sort of one, and now we're going back towards plenty. And we built up the business or the company a bit more to be able to do more than one thing at a time. So we hired a bunch more people over the past couple of years so we could do that. And now we can do 2 or 3 or 4 things at once. And so we're executing on that, exercising that, and seeing what happens.
So how do you define winning in the business?
Winning?
Yes, winning in the business.
I don't think of winning. I don't think you need to win. I think you just need to make sure you cover your costs and make a profit. So are we winning in any industry that we're in? No, we're if you look at email, Gmail is crushing us. They have 1 billion customers. Good for them. Great. We don't need 1 billion. We've got tens of thousands of paying customers. We're quite happy with that. Camp, lots and lots of products like Basecamp or compete in the same space like Basecamp. Good for them. We've got our huge customer base of Basecamp customers, which is basically drives our entire business. Wonderful. We're happy with that. Are we winning? No. Are we losing? No. We're doing neither. We're just existing in a place that's sustainable for us and thriving in that space. That's how I look at it. So it's not about beating anyone or destroying anyone or taking a market or anything. It's about thriving. And you can thrive as long as your costs are in check and you have a nice customer base, you can thrive. And that's all we're trying to do here. It's very much like nature, going back to the nature thing. In any ecosystem, there are, can be tens of thousands of species coexisting, battling for resources, but they're not battling to take all the resources. They're battling to find their share of the resources that support them and their species. And it turns out that a lot can coexist in the same square mile. That to me is a great model for business, actually. And that's what we try to do.
Recently, you have a blog post and also you mentioned about the intuition and gut feeling. The importance of making decisions, intuition based and gut decision. And you are asking not about what do you know, what do you think, a company as far as and that is an interesting approach. Do you ever feel limitations for this approach? Because you are also doing A/B tests. It's not intuition. It is purely maths. Is there limitations about intuition and Data-based decision.
Yes, everything's a trade-off. Your point about A/B tests, we don't do them that much, but when we do them, this is the interesting thing about A/B tests. So you test two things, and you get data, and everyone looks at the data. But I look at the two things. Where'd those come from? Why those two things? So why not test two other things, or two other things, or pick any combination of things? Where'd those ideas come from that you're testing in the first place? Did they come from other tests? Where'd those tests come from? So if you keep going down, at some point, it's like someone made a decision to try something. Someone had a hunch. Someone had an intuition. This design might be better than this design. And maybe you find out that it is, but where'd the designs come from? That, to me, I like to go backwards there and keep going backwards. And you realize at some point, someone just made a call. Where'd that call come from? It came from their gut at some point, some level, somewhere. Some designer decided to put the line here and not there. It wasn't scientific. It was intuition based. It was based on experience and judgment and years and art and all the things that we don't know and the millions of inputs that we don't understand that are influencing us every single day. I just find that mystery to be very interesting. I find it to be more honest, frankly, just to say that it is kind of mystery. And yeah, you can measure some things at the end of the chain, the end of the line. But what about the rest of the line? That to me is where it's exciting. So we're primarily a gut-driven, intuition-driven company. Make decisions on the fly. We come up with things, we try things, and we don't feel like we need to justify the things that we try or the things that we do. In the end, the market will tell us whether or not this is a viable idea or not. It doesn't mean it's a good or bad idea. Is it a viable idea in the market, in that environment? That's what the market can tell you. A good idea if you like the idea. If that satisfies you, it's a good idea. But whether or not it's viable is up to the market. So we leave the market. We leave it up to the market to determine whether or not we can stay in business. And so far we found that this is a pretty effective way of running a business for us. Other people are going to be different, but I would still challenge people to say who are very data driven to say, well, where'd the things that you're testing come from? It's a great question just to ask, even if you want to argue it. It's still a good question to ask. And I would ask, what are the things that you think of? Where'd those things come from? Where'd those things come from? If you go back a few layers, you don't really know where things came from. And I think that's interesting.
When you become indecision process, making a decision, especially intuition, do you sleep on it?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes actually. I would say if it's a really small decision, you just kind of, but if it's sort of like an interesting, bigger decision, perhaps, often a couple of us will be debating something and then we'll say, you know what, here's the decision we think we're going to make, but let's sleep on it. So we tend to make a decision and then sleep on the decision versus not making one, sleeping on it, and then seeing what comes up the next day. So we do like to tend to get to something by the end of the conversation, and then we'll sleep on it. And next morning has a way of telling you something different, or reinforcing what you picked. But there's a clarity that comes from tomorrow morning that doesn't come from right now. Right now, you're in the thick of it. You're bubbling with thoughts, arguing for something. Your ego's more involved, but you sleep on it and you wake up and all that stuff is not true anymore. Like the ego is not really there. And you're like, well, how do I feel about it today? And I like the clarity that tomorrow brings. So, but tomorrow is tomorrow. It's not every tomorrow forever. You keep thinking and pondering and thinking, like, you got to make a call. So we tend to give it a day.
So can you give an example of a hard decision, recent decision? So challenging. How do you navigate the complexities and to reach a conclusion?
Well, so a good recent example is as I mentioned, we're starting a new product this week, and we had 3 ideas that we could pursue that we felt pretty good about. So which one are we going to pursue? Now, that sounds like a big challenging question, and it sort of is, but it also isn't that big of a deal because we move quickly. So we're going to take about 3 months, which is about 2 cycles worth of work. 2 cycles are 6 weeks at a time.